want to share with you a beautiful story that will show us what happens when you improve, when you do something a little bit more. I remember many years ago, the first time that I came to the city of Manchester in England. Now, that's a wonderful, wonderful city. Everybody knows about London, but if you go to Manchester, you cannot believe how many kollels there are, how many schools there are, how many synagogues there are. It is such a growing community. I love going there. So many years ago when I was there the first time, I was about to give a speech. I think there were 500 women in this auditorium. And just as I'm about to leave the house where I was going to go to speak, somebody comes over to me and says, wait a second, you can't go yet. You got to go visit somebody. I said, what are you talking about? What do you mean? There's 500 people waiting. I can't visit anybody now. No. This woman has MS. She's a great lady. She's a Rebbitzin. She's a genius. She gives shiurim, and she just wants to see you for 2 minutes. She's in a wheelchair. She's almost paralyzed. Please, she's begging that you should just come to see her just for 2 minutes on your way. So how do you say no to a lady in a wheelchair? How do you say no to a lady that's almost paralyzed? My heart was breaking even before I got in there. So I said, of course, okay, let's go right now, and we'll go on the way. I come into her dining room. There's 25 women sitting around. They're waiting that she should give them a lecture, a shiur, because she was brilliant. But she wasn't in yet. And then they open up the curtain from the living room, and they wheel her in, and I thought my heart would fall. A young woman, I doubt if she was 40 at the time, radiant, and just, it was so young. And how could she be in a wheelchair, never, and her body is paralyzed? She could still move her hands and her head. And I just, my heart was breaking for her. And she said, Rabbi Krohn, I need you to do me a favor. I said, what is it? And I'm thinking, no matter what she says, how am I going to say no in front of 25 people, right? So she says, you know, Rabbi Krohn, there's a great tzaddik that lives in Manchester. His name is Rabbi Yehuda Zev Segel, the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva. He comes and he gives me encouragement, and I'm still able to write and type what he says. She said, there's a great rabbi, Rabbi Brevda, who every time he comes from Israel and he comes to Manchester, he comes in and he gives me chizuk, and I write down everything that he says. And I have read so many books, Hebrew books and secular books, about remaining strong in difficult times, because I've got to remain strong in this difficult time of my illness. And I'm finishing the book, and please write me a letter for the book. And I'm thinking, I said, why don't you get Rav Segel and Rav Brevda? They are tzaddikim, not me. I'm not the one to write a letter. She said, no, Rabbi Krohn, I want you to write the letter, because I listen to your CDs, I read your books. Please write me the letter. So again, how am I going to say no, right? So I said, I'll tell you what, Rebbitzin, I didn't read the book. So obviously I can't write the letter until I read the book. So when I go back to New York and you send me the book, I'll read it. And if I like it, I promise you, I'll write the letter. So I figured, over the telephone, 5,000 miles away, I could say no. But she was one step ahead of me. She said, here's the book. I typed it out. She had already typed it out. It was, she had the manuscript, and she was one step ahead. Okay, I took the book. I started reading it on the way back to New York from the flight from London. I couldn't stop crying. Such pain, such agony in her daily life as she's getting worse and worse. I think the saddest page on that book is the day of her 8th grade daughter's graduation. The daughter, everybody knows when your daughter graduates 8th grade, it's such a happy day. The daughters are dressed so beautifully, the mothers are dressed so nicely, and everybody's so proud of each other. And she said, I had to walk into the auditorium, I was wheeled in, and my daughter is so embarrassed that she has a mother that's so sick. And I'm embarrassed for her, and she's embarrassed for me. It's just awful coming into that graduation that way. It was just heartbreaking. But then she wrote one sentence in that book that literally is so illuminating, is so incredible. It's not her thought. She writes that she read it someplace, but she wrote this thought, and I took out my highlighter wherever I go. I'll see if I'm Shabbos, after Shabbos. I've got a highlighter wherever I am, because I'm always underlining. I'm a big believer in underlining your Sidur, your Gemara, your Chumash, your newspapers. Just underline. Because when you underline something, the next time you read it, it makes an impression. So she has this expression. Any fool can count the seeds in one apple. You don't have to be a big chacham. You open up an apple, you count 4 or 5 seeds. But only the highest power, Hashem, knows how many apples there are in one seed. Think about that. It's brilliant. Any fool can count the seeds in one apple, but only the highest power, Hashem, can count how many apples there are in one seed. Imagine you plant a seed of friendship. Somebody gives you some money when you need to open up a store or to start a job. So they're planting a seed of friendship, and then your whole life blossoms. You have a successful business, and then you have Shalom Bayit. Your wife is proud, and the husband is proud. Everybody's proud. The children are proud. The father's bringing money into the house. Or sometimes somebody needs a shidduch, and you make a call. You go out of your way to make a call or two for that person. You're planting a seed, and then they get married, and they build a whole family. That's all the apples. You planted that seed. That's what we got to do tonight. We got to plant seeds. Seeds of friendship, seeds of chizuk, seeds of encouragement. Because there's so many people, even in this base medrash tonight, that are so broken and so down because of things that life is dealing out to them. And eventually things could change. Anything can change. But sometimes you need that person to give you the chizuk. Or sometimes you could be that person to put your arm around somebody and give them the chizuk. And tell them, look, I know what you're going through. I went through it. And if I could make it, you could make it. That's the point. That's what chizuk is all about. And that's the moisef ha'holech that we have to undertake. We cannot let our brothers and sisters in life just go on without our involvement. Now, sometimes a person will say, listen, I'm okay. You don't have to, worry about me. Fine. But how many single mothers are out there? How many widows are out there? How many guys need a place for Shabbos? Guys who may have gotten divorced, they're also human beings. They also need a place. And what about the children from these homes where the parents can't teach them Torah? Maybe become a tutor for a child in Torah or in math or in science, whatever you know that you could help somebody else. And you put your arm around that person, or make a call for somebody that's out of a job. Make a call for somebody that needs a shidduch. These are all seeds that we can plant, and we have to get more involved with our brothers and sisters. We can't only be selfish and thinking only about ourselves. That's the moisef ha'holech of Hanukkah. To add a little bit more, and I'll tell you an amazing story. There's a school in the 5 towns. It's called May, M-A-Y, Mesivta Ateres Yaakov. And the principal there, Rabbi Mordechai Greene, told me this amazing story. He said in the early 1950s, there was in Hamilton, Ontario. Hamilton is 20 miles south of Ontario. And over there was a rabbi of an Orthodox synagogue, but it was a small, dinky little place. And the young couples were going to the conservative and the reform shuls because they had big, beautiful buildings. And the Rabbi Mordechai Greene, he knew that he better get some money to build a beautiful building. If he doesn't build a beautiful Orthodox shul, the young couples, they're not going to come there. So he goes to the Royal Bank of Canada and he asks to speak to the bank manager. It's a Gentile fellow. His name is Mr. Amy, a tall, good-looking Episcopalian guy. And he sits him down in his office. He says, how could I help you? And the rabbi says, I'm looking to build a synagogue. I need $150,000. Can the bank lend me the money so I could build a synagogue? Now, this is the early 1950s. $150,000 is a fortune, like $1 million today. And the rabbi says to him, what do you want to do? Now, he didn't want to say Orthodox because he knew that the Orthodox people in Hamilton had no money. So if he's going to say Orthodox, Mr. Amy's going to know there's no Orthodox people that have a lot of money. How are you ever going to pay me back? So he said, I want to build a Jewish house of worship. But then Mr. Amy says to him, yeah, but what denomination? So now he was stuck. So he said, Mr. Amy, I am an Orthodox rabbi and I want to build an Orthodox synagogue. And Mr. Amy just stops and he looks at him and tears are coming down his face. And then he says to Rabbi Greene, he says, I will give you the money and you'll be able to build a synagogue, but I want to tell you why. He says at the end of the 1920s, he says, my father was killed in a fire and our family was devastated. My mother, myself, my brother, my sister, we had nothing. There was no such thing as life insurance in those days. And we had nothing. And 2 days after the fire, there was a man who owned the general store. You know, in these small towns, they have a store that sells everything, hardware, food, clothes, everything. And the man who owned that store was a man by the name of Sam Bukovetsky. He was an Orthodox Jew. And 2 days after the fire, he comes into my house and he says to my mother, Mrs. Amy, as long as I own this store, your children will have clothes. You come in and you take whatever you need. I will never ask you for money. You want to pay me? Sometimes you can. And he says, Mrs. Amy, as long as I own the store, your children will have food. Every morning you come in here, you take the bread, the milk, the butter, the eggs, whatever you need. You can keep account. I will never ask you for money. As long as I own this store, your children will have food. And Mr. Amy, who's now wiping away his tears, says to Rabbi Greene, the only reason we survived was because of that Orthodox Jew. And he said, when I saw you through the big bank open window, you looked like an Orthodox Jew. And it occurred to me, you know, it's about time that I paid back Sam Bukovetsky. And when you told me you're an Orthodox Jew who wants to build an Orthodox synagogue, I knew that God sent you. Chaim, I want to tell you, my dear friend, when Hidabrut puts this on, you got to go to Hamilton, and that shul is there, the gorgeous shul. Take a picture of it, because Rabbi Daniel Greene, the son of this Rabbi Mordechai, is the Rav there now. And Rabbi Mordechai, Baruch Hashem, is still alive. Maybe get a picture of him for Hidabrut. That's how you do it. But how did that happen? That's the seeds. A shul was built because of the seeds that Sam Bukovetsky did for a family that wasn't Jewish. But they were human beings, and they were down, and they were out. And he planted seeds of friendship and love and concern. And a big, beautiful shul was built. Not only that, I want to tell you, Mesifta Ateres Yaakov interviewed Rabbi Mordechai Yafi, who told me the story. He said, I grew up in that shul. He said, until I was 17, my father didn't let me go to a yeshiva. You know why? Because he was a Holocaust survivor. He was afraid to send me out of town. When I was 17, I first went to Ney Yisrael in Toronto. And he says, I always say to the boys in the school, the 200 kids, he said, look at me. I started learning Torah when I was 17. And I became a principal of a school. Imagine what you guys could do. And you started in the first grade. So look at that. Sam Bukovetsky, who's surely in the Olam HaEmes, right? He planted seeds at the end of the 1920s. Not only was a shul built, but a Rosh Yeshiva was built, who's today teaching Torah to hundreds of kids. That's the Moshe V'Hoilech.